Alright, hello guys, how's it going? In today's video, I'm going to be presenting you our weekly forecast from January 5th until January 12th. Now, before we get started with this video though, I would ask that you do subscribe if you do like weather-related content, and also make sure to share this with your friends and family if they like weather-related content as well. Let's get right into things. So we're looking at last week's forecast, temperature forecast, and you can probably tell this is pretty close to what happened if you live in the eastern United States especially. It was quite the warm week for January and the last couple of days of December as well. Now, take a mental note of this, take a mental memory. We're about to move on to what really happened right now. And you can see, I think overall, it was very close to what actually happened on my forecast, but the placement of where the very warmest temperatures were was a little bit off. But besides that, I think it was quite well done. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments down below. Now, we're about to get into our precipitation forecast, where there's going to be a few dry areas and then a few very, very wet areas, actually. I'm expecting a lot of precipitation this week, a lot of interesting stuff to happen, and actually, at the end of the week, I'm looking at the potential for a big-time severe weather event on day 7, so right around the 12th is when we're expecting that for the Deep South. So we might talk a little bit about that later on in the video, but it's very, very interesting and very rare this time of year to have that big of a threat for severe weather, so that's probably the biggest, most interesting thing this week. Now, let's get into that precipitation forecast. Alright, so as you can see here on our first layer, we're expecting more dry than normal conditions there for California, portions of Nevada, and down there through Arizona. This is only our first layer, indicating that it's not really going to be too far below average as far as precipitation, but it'll be a little bit more dry on paper there, and I don't expect too much precipitation for those regions whatsoever this week. Northern California, though, we might get some actually, but on the southern portions and middle portions, not so much. Now, let's look at our second below normal precipitation region here, and you can see portions of Texas, Louisiana, and then up through into the southeast coast of the United States. I'm expecting a little bit more dry than normal conditions. Again, not really getting into that medium shade, so it's going to be a little bit more dry than normal, specifically on paper, but you're probably not even going to notice it if you're not like really just paying attention to actually how much rain fell and how much your average is. You wouldn't even really know, but on paper, this will go down as more dry than normal. So here in all the southern United States, we're expecting a little bit more dry than normal here along these two small areas. And again, we don't really get into medium shades, so it's not going to be too noticeable. But we're about to get into our above average precipitation regions, where we'll talk a little bit more about that severe weather threat that I mentioned before, and also the areas where we're expecting far above average precipitation this week. Alright, so here's your first area of above average precipitation. You can see there for the Great Lakes, down through into some of the south central United States and some of the deep south states. We're expecting slightly above normal precipitation at least. And the area that we're expecting that risk for severe weather later on in the week is down there for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, the deep south states, maybe even Arkansas as well. That's an area that we're really seeing the potential. We're going to have a lot of available energy for storms to start developing. It's going to be a very, very warm day, and then precipitation is going to be in the area. All of those things spell trouble as far as severe weather, and I'm excited to cover that event with you guys. We're going to be making videos about that in the future, obviously, so stay tuned for that, and we will talk more about that as the week progresses, and I hope you join us in our discussions over that. Now, let's get into our second layer of above average precipitation for this region here, and you can see for portions of Oklahoma, Texas, up through Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, as well as a little bit of Ohio there. We're going to be experiencing moderately above average precipitation. Again, in this moderate shade, this is where it's going to be a little bit more noticeable finally. You will notice it's probably quite the wet week there, especially towards the end. We have some storm systems moving in. So I do expect quite a bit of precipitation for those regions. Now let's get into the Pacific Northwest, where we also have a slightly above normal precipitation region there, where Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and through some of the Northern Rockies as well, we're all experiencing slightly above normal precipitation. Let's add that second layer, though. That's going to be for Oregon and Washington, specifically the western portions. That's where it's going to start to get a bit more noticeable in that medium shade. And then we even have a third shade there, and that's where it's just going to be extremely wet. We're going to have tons of storms moving on shore, probably like a handful for sure, 4 or 5 different storm systems moving onshore. We're going to be very, very wet week for you guys up there in the Pacific Northwest. Now we're about to move on to our official temperature forecast for this week, which is going to be super exciting, where we're going to take a look at where you can expect colder than normal conditions and also where you can expect warmer than normal conditions as well. All right, so here we can see our first layer of temperature here, and this is going to be our slightly below average temperature region there for southern Oregon through portions of the Rockies, including Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and then down through into Colorado and Utah, as well as Arizona and New Mexico. We also see Nevada and California in this below average temperature region. Again, if you're only in this first shade, you're probably not going to notice it too much on paper. We will have below average temperatures for the most part, but really it'll feel pretty close to average for a lot of these regions here. But we also have a second shade of blue, and this is where it is going to actually be quite noticeable there for southern Wyoming into portions of Utah, Colorado, and then the very far extreme northern regions of Arizona and New Mexico as well. This is our medium shade of blue, and it'll be a little bit more noticeable for these regions that, hey, it's been a pretty cold week. And that's a pretty similar region actually to where we had our last week's cold temperature setup as well. Now, we have a huge area of above average temperatures here for the eastern United States, as you can see, basically from some of the portions of Montana down through Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, everywhere eastward from there, we're at least experiencing slightly above normal temperatures. So again, another warm week for the eastern United States. If you looked at our January forecast and if you looked at our I forget which video it was, but we talked a little bit about the earlier pattern of January. If you looked at either of those videos, it was pretty clear that this was the way January is going to shape up. And sure enough, we're still looking at very warm conditions for the eastern United States for the foreseeable future. I would like to mention, though, this does not make it impossible for snow. It just makes it a little less likely, obviously, but it's definitely possible we do see snow even within the very, very warm time frames of the winter months. So again, not going to be too noticeable in this first layer, but we do have a second layer there for the very middle portions of this region here. In this orange region, portions of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and then eastward in through the deep south states, some of the southern Great Lakes states, and even into some of the Appalachians as well. The very southern regions of this in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas. Again, that's our area that we're expecting potential for severe weather later in the week, and the warmer temperatures will definitely help with that development of potential severe weather later in the week. Again, we will have much, much more coverage on that, so if you haven't subscribed and you are interested in that, be sure to do so, as we will be making potentially 1 to maybe even 2 or 3 videos on that topic. Now, we even have a second area of above normal temperatures. This is a very small one, though, there for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. We have a little bit of warmer than normal conditions, but you probably won't notice it in that little tiny region. Now, we're about to get into our special note segment of the video, which is going to be very exciting. We have 2 special notes, which are going to be very interesting to take a look at here as we discuss these 2 weather events that are going to be occurring this week. All right, so as you can see here, our first special note is going to be stormy there for the northwestern United States, Washington, Oregon, down through portions of Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, and even into a little bit of Wyoming. We're all expecting pretty stormy conditions. Again, a handful of storms for this region, maybe even 4 or 5 storms, which is going to be just a ton for a 1-week period. I mean, that's almost... that's pretty close to 1 per day. So that's just storm after storm after storm. It's going to be very frequent storms here. Tons of precipitation going to be falling there, specifically there for Washington, Oregon, especially the coastal regions of those states. We're going to just be getting tons and tons of precipitation. And you already average a ton of precipitation. So to see that we're going to be experiencing far above normal precipitation for those regions is just extreme. These could be in the form of snow, could be in the form of rain. We will see as we get closer to these individual storms, but obviously the high elevation areas are more susceptible to snow, and then down there in the plains or in the coastal regions, we're a lot more likely to just have rain. Now, for your second and final special note, this one, take it with a grain of salt. It looks pretty minor and pretty quick, but we do have the potential for a little bit of a winter storm there from the 7th through the 9th in areas that have not seen snow so far this winter along the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, and then through the southern northeastern regions of the United States. I see the potential for a minor winter storm. I don't think it will affect this wide of an area, but it could be further south on this. It could be further north. But it will be set up most likely somewhere within that blue shade, and I'm expecting the potential for maybe, I would say, a bullseye of 3 to 6 inches of snow. So again, quite minor with this one, maybe 3 or 4 inches for some people. It definitely had more potential, but it just beats the trough in. The cold air doesn't get in place in time, so this one looks to be very minor, even though it has much potential, but it's just so close, we're not going to see it really take advantage of that potential. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. As I said before, be sure to share this with your friends and family if you think they'll find it interesting, and I'll see you guys in the next video.